Good afternoon and welcome to the Way to Wow show. I am your host, Kevin Bemmel. It's good to see you all today. And I'm going to be talking with my guest very soon, Robin Robinson. And this is Robin's second appearance on the show. So I know we're going to have a great time. Before I introduce Robin, I want to mention my guest from last week, Suzanne Woods Fisher. Suzanne is a very successful author of both fiction and nonfiction, award-winning, best-selling. And, she had a very, very interesting story to tell about becoming a professional writer. This was something she had always wanted to do. But she contended that it was hard work and learning the craft that really brought her success. Rather than some sort of, inspiration or connection with the muse, or I think what many times we think is what's involved in writing. So I invite you to go to our YouTube channel, The Way to Wow Show, and check out the episode with Suzanne from last week. And hope you will enjoy it. And if you have questions about becoming a writer or any of this sort of writing or business of writing, then Suzanne's contact information is there, and I know she'll be glad to respond, as will I. Now I turn to someone that I don't remember if I mentioned this the first time you were on the show, but it was such a treat to have you on the show because I'm such a huge fan of your book on whiskey, which is, I see it's there in the background. Yeah, exactly. and maybe you'll touch it a little bit later on. But Robin Robinson, I knew him as the guru of whiskey. But then when we met on the show last time, I realized this is a man with an enormously eclectic background. And although last show was really focused more on the kind of whiskey side of his career, we're going to look more broadly today at many of the things that Robin has done and how that eclecticism really has driven the success that he's had. So Robin, thank you for this return engagement on the Way to Wow show, People Making Money.
Well, thanks, Kevin. It's a real pleasure to be here and an honor as well. So thanks for having me.
Yeah, absolutely. You're welcome. So I want to start out by taking you as far back as you care to go, maybe even as a kid. I know when I was a kid, I went through the phase, I wanted to be a fireman, I wanted to be an astronaut, right? All those things that kids want to be, none of which I became, by the way. So would you share with us, what were sort of the early thoughts you had about what you wanted to do, professionally in a career or for a job?
Wow. I can remember the first profession that I wanted to go into was being a sociologist. And this was like in sixth grade. I had found out what a sociologist was and what they did. And I said, that's what I want to do, because it seemed to me that sociologists explore the past in order to get to the present. And that's how I think I understood it. And I loved that concept of kind of getting back to the genesis of something, getting back to the gist of something, and then using that as an explanation of how the path went going forward. And then, in sixth grade or whatever, you're not thinking about the future too much. So it's kind of like, how did I get here?
Right.
Yeah.
So how, and then as far as I know, you didn't become a sociologist. So,
right. Although I really did like my sociology classes in college. Yeah, but no. I will tell you that that something happened to me later on in a career where I rediscovered who I really was when I was 6 years old. And it was a discovery point that I was taken on during an acting workshop of all things, and it led me back to being 6 years old. And I said, "Oh yeah, that was me, and that's what I did, and that's what I do right now."
So take us from 11, 12 years old, wanting to be a sociologist. And I believe your first professional endeavor was as an actor, right? So how did tell us about how you got from point A to
Yeah.
point B, or maybe it was point S at that point.
Well, I tell you what, I mean, I'm literally all over the. I guess that's really the gist of this conversation. Is I'm really all over the map on this. What I knew that I was a class clown, and I was very facile with words. I loved words. I loved vocabulary. I loved the use of them. I loved listening to them. I was very much in love with every comic that I had ever seen on Ed Sullivan's show and all of the variety shows, and that to me was like, that seemed natural. It just seemed like a natural thing to do. Get up and make fun of people, or make fun of myself, and make people laugh. And like I got picked on a lot as a kid. I was named Robin Robinson with red hair in a steel town. So I suffered a fair share of abuse, but you learn the mechanisms of how to avoid that, and then how to cope and manage that as well. And humor was an effective tool, and then sometimes it was an effective weapon as well. So I found out that I was actually really quite good at that. I was too nice of a guy to really do cutting, really, I'm going to destroy you with my words type of thing. That was pretty much against what my growing ethos was. But I learned to use vocabulary and sentences and thoughts as a way to cope with those things. And then they started to take me into other places. When you start thinking, and becoming your own person, and understanding basic philosophical concepts, you're able, and I was brought up in a religious household as well. We were active members of our church. I grew up in the Eastern Orthodox religion, so it's a very, very ritual based religion. I was an altar boy and all, stuff like that. So I had that kind of grounding. I had a big family, a big immigrant family background. My grandparents, my maternal grandparents were immigrants from Syria. And all of their children, of which my mother was the fifth out of 12, were all born in America. They were arranged marriage in the United States and everything. So I had this big rambling, Middle Eastern, the more I yell at you, the more I love you type of a family, What? It was a similar family, I think. It was so funny. I remember watching. I think it was Annie Hall when Woody Allen's kind of going back into and to scream at you is to love you, and yeah, I get that. That's exactly who the family was, But what was interesting was this. I was very, very good in school. I was very, very smart, and I got tested IQ, and it turned out, very, very, very high. But I was in a blue collar town, a very working class mill town in Pittsburgh, and I had an incident in the mill. I worked there in the summer, and I worked in the worst job in the mill, and what they did, they rotated you like every 4 or 5 weeks. The summer guys went on different jobs, and I ended up in something called the flumes. So these were these big, massive blast furnaces that cooked the steel at U.S. Steel, and they were fed by these long, big, wide corridors of air that were deep under the ground, and there was a crew down there that had to keep those things clean. So they're down under the ground, and the union says you have to come up every 40 minutes for air. You can't stay down there all the time, but you're down there with shovels and air hammers, and it's a man's world. This is where men work, and and I'm this skinny. I'm a skinny, goofy kid in my college freshman
Okay.
vacation, right?
Gotcha. Huh?
And I want to fit in with these guys because I grew up in that type of environment, and I want to be one of those guys. And so I'm getting along with them, and I'm like smoking cigarettes with everybody, and doing all this, you know. And I went up for a cigarette break at one point, and my foreman followed me out. Now, most of the people who worked down in there were black men, and it'll kind of give you an idea of how jobs were structured. You know, even in what is semi-integrated town, you can see like not the greatest jobs.
Right.
So this was a really burly black guy, and he was a fabulous guy. He had a great sense of humor, and he used that to kind of motivate the workers down there as well. You know, kind of keep them, you know, and laughing and everything like that. And I just thought he was a great guy, and so he comes up, and I'm smoking a cigarette, and he bums a cigarette from me, and so we're smoking a cigarette together. I'm thinking, oh my god, I'm like smoking a cigarette with my foreman right here. This is like so cool. And he's going, so yeah, man. So you're getting along pretty well with the guys down there. I'm going, yeah, yeah, yeah. Like Freddie's gonna get a new car. I'm gonna go see his new car, and you know, of course, you know, the pay here is great. It's all union wages, and you're getting shift differential and cost of living raise, and you know, I said, yeah, man, it's great. And he goes, yeah, the money's good. And I said, yeah. And then he stubs out his cigarette, and he gets right in my face. And he says, who in the fuck do you think you are? You want to be another mill hunky just like everybody else down here? You're going to school, right? I said, yeah. He said, well, yeah, goddamn it. If you're here in September, I will personally kick your ass. And he threatens me. And I'm just like freaked out, right?
Yeah.
And so obviously my work attitude changed down because now I was really I felt that I had offended him. I offended everybody. I felt I wasn't one of them, and that's exactly what he was trying to do. That man is my guardian angel. He sits right here, right there.
Right. Amazing.
He right in that 1 minute told me how the world works. I was told as a kid, you're going to be something, you're going to be something, you're going to be something, you need to study, you're going to go here, and you know, and your family tells you that's kind of yeah, right. You know, and then, you know, I was kind of iffy about going to college. I didn't know what I wanted to do. I think I'm going to be a lawyer, you know, so I'm going to study law or something like that. And it's what everybody else wanted me to be. This guy clarified me immediately, right? And so I went back completely different when I went back into my sophomore year. And interestingly enough, I had, you know, revelations inside my head that I didn't know that I was having, and I ended up becoming the thing that I wanted to be, which was an actor. Right. So I abandoned this pre-law, you know, thing. It's like, no, man, I stepped on stage for my first time. I absolutely fell in love with the idea of inhabiting a character, and wouldn't you know it, the play that I was in was Inherit the Wind, about a lawyer.
Wow. Yeah.
You know, right? It was about one of the great, you know, legal things of the 20th century, and so yeah, so that really, it was a really clarifying moment. And the next clarifying moment I had was later on in my senior year. And I was now a theater major, and I had to take a whole bunch of other classes besides acting. I had to take lighting, I had to take stage design, I had to take costume. And I was kind of like, why am I doing this? I want to be an actor. I want to be an actor. And I was bending the ear of one of my acting professors who I thought was actually sympathetic to me. And wouldn't you know it, he throws me up against the wall. I've got this thing about guys who just like want to like threaten me, you know. He throws me up against the wall and he goes, quit your whining. He says, quit whining. If you want to go act, leave right now and go out there. Nick Nolte lived in his car outside of Louisville Actors Theater until they employed him. Go out and live in your car. And this was another one of these clarifying moments where I said, yeah, you know. And so in a way, I kind of did. I actually, for about 4 years after college, I sort of just skipped all over the country. And I picked up acting gigs and bartending gigs and waiting gigs, and stand-up comedy, improvisational comedy, dinner theater, children's theater, regional theater. I mean, anybody who would let me up on stage. And until I finally got to the point, he says, okay, I have to make a decision about a career. And it was kind of like, I'm not really handsome enough for Los Angeles. Chicago's too damn cold. But, New York, New York is where like Joe Papp was at, Shakespeare in the Park, and Lee Strasberg was still teaching at the Actors Studio, and that's where I want to go. So that's kind of how I ended. That's how I kind of like ended up in show business. Was through that.
Just out of curiosity, kind of what was the time period when you were this sort of vagabond actor? Was this the early 70s or?
I graduated college in 77. So it was from 77. I got to New York in 1981.
Oh, okay.
So I lived in Austin, I lived in Houston, and I lived in New Orleans in those intervening years. And just being kind of like a vagabond. A vagabond was kind of like a purpose. The purpose was like, get on stage and work as much of the craft as you can, and with whoever who would give you the opportunity to do that.
Yeah, it's interesting because I have a friend who's around our age, and he all his life wanted to be a magician. And finally, one day he just said, I'm going to be a magician. And, he bounced around, and anywhere they would let him do magic, he would do it. Finally went to Branson, and he was there for quite some time now. I think Austin, Texas, I think.
Yeah.
Peter the Adequate, which is, I think it's like the greatest name.
Peter the Adequate. Oh, that is the best title I've ever heard. That is fantastic. It's like, I'm going to set your expectation right now, and then I'm going to best it every time I go.
Yeah. So, and I met him when I was, in high school. He lived in our house, and he would do this card trick for me where I would hold the deck, and I would do the trick, and he would correct me because I was doing it wrong. And he always was able to correct. And I mean, he must have done that trick for me 100 times. I could never figure out how he did it. Right.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, that's great. It's kind of like, you remember, who was the big guy and the little guy? The Magic team.
Penn and Teller.
Penn and Teller, right. Yeah, they would show you the trick. This is how the trick is done. And you still couldn't figure out how the trick got done. Yeah. That's great.
So now you're in New York. I mean, late 70s, early 80s. This was really I know, because I'm just a few years younger than you. So we're talking about, A Chorus Line had come out around that time. Annie came out around. This was really a very, very productive time in New York theater. So what was it like to be in New York, as an actor at that time?
Oh my God! I mean, there was nothing like it, and it's really where I sort of like codified all my life lessons. Was right there. First of all, it was a battle zone. It was a war zone in New York City. We had, New York had actually just declared bankruptcy a few years ago. The Rockefeller laws had released all of these mentally unstable people from the upstate sanitariums, and they were all over New York. It was rough, but it was fantastic. Like Henry V at Agincourt, we lift up our sleeves to show our scars from that, and we show them with pride. So I took my first real Shakespeare classes there. New York was really all about study and try to get work, study and try to get work, study and try to get work, study and try to work, and then work your other menial jobs. And I was now a pretty sophisticated waiter and dining room captain. So I knew my way around like a flaming pan of something, and how to make a Caesar salad, and all the theatrical stuff that you do that. So that's what I was doing, kind of bouncing around, doing that. Uh, it was very difficult. It was I actually went into therapy for the first time, because I realized that something was really off. I was incredibly unhappy, and through therapy, she got me to start writing. I would come in and I would tell her this story. She goes, "That's a very interesting story. Could you write that down for me and just bring it in next time?" And I said, "Yeah, sure." So I had this little typewriter, and I just and then next, so this was brilliant. She just got me to write these things. And so I started to develop this love of language, right, which I always had, but now I'm kind of putting it down on a piece of paper. And it's therapeutic for me. It's helping me excise these demons that were inside of me. And it was really wonderful, until she retired. It was fantastic, you know. But it got me to do something which was really important in New York at that time. I was not a chorus line, and New York at that time was what was the name of the very famous British composer with the three names that did Evita? Yeah, you know what I'm talking about, right? Yeah.
Yeah.
Broadway was all about those big, massive musicals, and
Andrew Lloyd
so Andrew Lloyd Webber, yeah, thank you, and all those guys, and I was not a musical guy. I could move, I could dance a bit. I had a pretty good voice. I could sing, but I was not a musical performer. I was an offbeat, kind of a weird guy, and so I ended up doing a lot of downtown performance pieces. I did a lot of crazy off Broadway stuff. I was very character driven and typically on a satirical or weird dark edge. That was my forte, and I was pursuing stand-up comedy for a little bit, and then I sort of abandoned that and went full time into dramatic, um, and then I got an opportunity to actually study. Because prior to this, you're taking classes, so it's classes. So everything is piecemeal. You're putting it all together. You're trying to put some form without any understanding of what form is. I'm going to take this voice lesson. That person said I should work with that person. So, and then I actually submitted myself. I got an opportunity. I got a scholarship to study something called the Meisner technique. And the Meisner technique is a very, very, very solid acting methodology that was developed by Sandy Meisner, and it was him and Lee Strasberg and a few others that had studied with the Russians and brought that back to the United States and kind of formed what we know as the dramatic persona of the post-war period. And all of the famous people that you've ever heard of that came out of New York and went to LA, all studied in one of these methodologies. But it was 2 years and 2 years of dedicated academy type study. So I wasn't allowed to pursue any acting jobs during that time. And between that and the Shakespeare study that I had just gotten out of, which is Shakespeare is very, very technically precise. You spend 3 hours a day just going la 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 na 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 na, moving your tongue and not moving your lips, and then going into this where there's no script for the first year. There's no scripts the first year. You are actually working improvisation in order to get to the heart of what you are about as a person and what are the things that move you as a person and what's your truth, so that you can then in turn bring truth to whatever character that you're playing in any specific situation. And it was grueling. It was grueling and was very difficult to get through the entire thing. I loved it, but it challenged me to the. Here's what we had in the class. This will give you an idea of a Meisner class. On one wall was a mattress hanging on the wall.
Okay.
That mattress was there because you were about to unlock something that was so ugly and so horrible inside of you that you needed to punch somebody, and the teacher would go to the mattress. and you would take it out on this mattress and then bring yourself back out into the scene.
Hmm.
That's how deep this thing went. That's how deep this, and when you come out of there, you know who you are as an actor now. There's no bullshit about this. You know who you are. There, you discover, or you don't get through the 2 years. Because I saw a couple of people drop out. It just wasn't for them, and they. But when you get through the 2 years, you know who you are as an actor, and that was one of the most incredible revelations that I have had, as an adult human being. At the end, I knew who I was. I knew exactly where my strengths were at. I knew exactly where my weaknesses are at. What they do is they literally strip you down to nothing. That's what the whole first year is. Get rid of every trick, every actor's trick, every one of these bullshit things that you piled on your entire career. That stuff does not work. That's getting stripped away, and that's why you end up going to the mattress, because it's like you're taking away all my shields, and now I'm left vulnerable and skinless and helpless here in front of all these people. And now you're an actor. Now you're an actor. Now you understand what it is. So when I came out of there, it was and wouldn't you know it, I actually had a career. I got an agent right after that, and I did very well I did a lot of television commercials in the 80s. And I was now making a living. The other thing that
I was just going to observe it. It's an interesting process of the sort of breaking down of the self, in order to rebuild a more authentic self.
Absolutely.
The reason I raise that is, in the military, that's essentially what boot camp is.
That's
right?
Exactly right.
And you're going through this experience with, all of your colleagues, and it's hard. I mean, it's really hard. Now, I didn't, as an officer, I didn't have to go through boot camp, but I went through, officer training. Sure. And interestingly enough, I mean, we actually had one young nurse. She was in her mid-20s. She couldn't take it, and she, it was just too raw for her.
That's exactly right. When you come face to face with who you are, there's no bullshit going on right there. And you're right. You have to actually strip away all of this immaterial fluff that you've accumulated. Because again, why did we do that? Because sophistication is all about protecting the child within. Mm-hmm. Right. It's all about, putting layers of onion skin on top of it until now I'm this thing right here. Right. But down here, I'm still like this little thing. Right. And this is actually sometimes called boot camp. This was sometimes called an acting boot camp. It used the same metaphor. Strip away all the bullshit. This is who you are. Once you know who you are, then we can depend on you.
And that's the same exact philosophy in the military, right? Because we not only can we depend on you, but we can also rebuild you into the person you need to be, so that you're the service member next to you can depend on you and know that there's a likelihood you're going to come through, right?
Well, there's an
existential question at that point.
100%, and there's a feeling of esprit de corps in both of these scenarios. When I'm on stage, I really need to trust my fellow performers. I have to trust them with my performance, and they in turn have to trust me. One of the best ways I've ever seen this actually demonstrated was a friend of mine who was a director, and he was a very avant-garde director. And he was putting on a play in the woods. So we all drove to the woods, and we're walking down this path, and we encounter this wonderful French surrealist play. But all of these performers are just kind of like out in the woods, and they're performing as we encounter them. And then it started getting dark, and he did something that was brilliant. And now this was back in the 80s when these things were brand new, but he had flashlights mounted on each one of their heads. Mm-hmm. That was the only light, which means when you're speaking, I have to look directly at you with my light so that everyone can see you. And in turn, when I'm speaking, you're doing the same thing for me. And that's called giving focus. And when you give focus to other people, you're taking it off of you, you're giving it to them, and then they in turn give. That's the ultimate level of trust right there. It was one of the most beautiful demonstrations of that I had ever seen. Without me focusing on you, literally focusing on you, then there was no way that I was going to be able, or that you were going to be able to perform. So yeah, that whole sense of, this is two buddies in a foxhole. This is the exact same thing. Only one where the stakes are actually much more much higher.
And that ability to focus on the other person,
Yeah.
well, obviously crucial in acting, because that's what brings authenticity to the scene. In our day-to-day lives, though, the ability to really focus on another human being, listen to them, connect with them, right? It's perhaps the most important skill that we can develop. And yet there's so many things to distract us from it, especially these days. It's just astonishing that anyone can focus on anybody for more than, the length of the life of a tsetse fly, as they say.
Well, yeah, and quite honestly, because of today, because of the fact that we are literally carrying a distraction in our pocket at every given moment, we are now losing the cultural imperative of doing that. Because I know that everybody during some part in their life walked away with an interaction with one other person and came away feeling, I felt as if I was the only person in the room when I was speaking with that person. And that is essentially that sense, that sense of someone giving you actively listening. And this is one of the things that actors work on, active listening, so that you understand that I am trying to pull this in. And either my lack of doing that is going to cause a reaction on your side, or my intensity of doing that. And then, that's actually how the scene progresses, for example. But yeah, that sense of being there and being present and being in the moment. These are all the things that, what the 2 years of training was really all about, was doing that. And it can't not spill over into the rest of your life. Yeah. It can't not do that, because then you start to see the effects of that, the cause and effect of now, my girlfriend and my family and all of the other people that I'm interacting with are reacting to me differently now, because I'm actively listening to what they're saying. And it becomes much more of a satisfying interaction that you have with people, when you know that someone is actually listening to you and not, thumbing through their texts, or, wandering off somewhere else, So yeah, so it had a net positive effect in just about everything I did. And then, when I went into sales, so at one point it was time for me to leave show business, and I kind of saw the writing on the wall. I was now getting too old to be Hamlet, and like, shit, right? And
maybe King Lear, but
Lear, yeah, right. I can still do Lear, right? I've got 20 more years to do Lear,
yeah.
But we picked up from I had my daughter. My daughter was born now. We picked up and moved to Los Angeles, and for me to pursue my acting career. One of the things that happened back in New York is at one point I couldn't. The reason I went into therapy was because I was working in a very famous restaurant in New York City, and at the end of my shift, I couldn't balance out all my checks, and I freaked out, and I started throwing chairs around in the employee lunchroom. And I was summarily fired after that. And that's when I said, okay, maybe I should probably talk to somebody.
Some little PTS got into there.
Yeah, a little bit, yeah.
Now, right?
And yeah, but I realized I couldn't. What was happening is I came to realization I can't go back. I heard my foreman in my face, you can't go back there again. You can't go back there again. So what I had learned in between, in the interim, was I was picking up the first I was actually doing the first dedicated word processing. I learned how to type on a Wang dedicated word processor, which were like the early before the PCs. And I was getting temp jobs, and I was getting paid incredible amount of money to type documents on this brand new screen with this strange keyboard. And then I learned IBM PCs after that, and boy, I'm thinking, wow, this stuff is really cool. And when I left acting, I eventually found my way into the tech field. First, teaching things like DOS, and teaching Windows, and teaching Word and Excel and things like that in classes. And then working for a company where I had a lot of kind of computer responsibilities. And then it was eventually hired by Skadden Arps, the third largest law firm in the world, to be on their network support team. And then from there, I ended up being an IT director for a mid-sized ad agency out in Los Angeles. And then I got hired by a Silicon Valley software company. So I had this really strange progression, but what was going on was I really fell in love with this technology, and I was very good at explaining it to someone else. I was very good at taking very complex ideas and things and breaking them down to its simplest without insulting anybody, and so that they can actually enjoy it as well. Because I saw them as like, wow, this is going to make our lives so much better. So that's what I really got good at was understanding. And here I'm getting a chance to use that famed intellect that I was measured at back when I was a kid now. But I was really good at actually just using the right words to bring this technology into your hands and make you comfortable with it, so that you can go off and do whatever it is that you wanted to do. And that's sort of like what led me into sales.
So, not meaning to contradict you, but
yeah,
into your story, it seems to me that your success in that field, while it may have been partly due to your intellect, I suspect, as someone who in the beginning kind of struggled to understand how all the technology works, having the kind of attention that you could give them, that you developed as an actor, with your love of language and finding the right words to really communicate with someone, those two skills, I suspect, were a large part of your success in that endeavor, right? Because people are afraid and they carry all kinds of baggage. And it sounds to me like you were able to either cut through that or find a way around it, or help them find a way around it.
I was synthesizing all this information, and I was actually activating something that I had no idea that I had, and I didn't even know the word for it, but I was actually activating my natural sense of empathy, which is one of the things that I think that is one of my strong points. I have a really good, healthy sense of empathy. I can put myself in your place. I can understand the struggles that you're going through. And if I have an opportunity to help you in somewhere where I'm going to bring some value, then here's how I can do it. I started out working for all of the old New York City banks, like Manufacturers Hanover, and I was like, I'd be put in their back offices. And right at about the time when somebody in the executive department decided, we're getting rid of all of your IBM Selectrics and we're going to put in all these brand new computers, and these poor secretaries are out there going, what's going on? And they're hitting the enter key at the other end of every line, and it's kind of like the whole thing's a mess, And I was in that environment, and I happened to actually be quite facile at it. So I ended up going from secretary desk to secretary desk to secretary desk and say, okay, try this and think about it in this way. And I like to use metaphors and things like that to help people do that. And at one point, the manager calls me into his office. He goes, okay, what's going on with you and all the secretaries out there?
I was thinking you were going to say your wife was going to.
I know. It's the manager, right? Me and all of the 55-year-old secretaries that are out there, right? So what's going on here, right? And I explained to him, I said, the guys down in the tech department, they just kind of flop these things on their desks, and they gave them maybe 2 hours of training. They're lost out there. So they've been asking me to help them. And once everyone knows, oh, that guy, Robin, he knows how to do this. And all of a sudden I'm pulled over here. And he goes, oh, yeah, so tell me more about this. And I'm telling him more about this. He goes, all right, here's what we're going to do. You're going to actually run a training class on Saturday afternoon for me. Okay, what do you want for it? I'm going, $25. He got me for a song, because it's my first consulting gig.
Yeah, it's just a song.
I didn't want to get fired, so I said, oh, $25. So I charged him $25. He paid me $25 cash. And we brought in about 7 or 8 secretaries from 10 until 2 p.m. on a Saturday. And I kind of took them all through the basics of understanding how this thing works. It was my first consulting gig. And the first thing a consultant learns is don't underprice yourself, So I start out my career at $25, and I'm working for Citibank. They could have at least afforded 50. So that kind of became this thing that I really got really good at doing, and that just that became my when I wasn't acting, that became sort of my lifeblood work. That was my day job, so to speak. And until eventually, when I realized show business now really not for me anymore. Emotionally, it's not for me. I didn't really like myself in the industry anymore, and I was lucky enough to understand that, to acknowledge that I was out of place. So I started doing these gigs, and then I ended up in the tech industry, like I said, through these, and then that ended up moving me back here into the New York City area, and I stayed in the tech industry for about 8 years. And essentially we're selling, now I'm working for the Silicon Valley startups, and I'm selling essentially software, but we're not selling software. We're selling business transformation. We're in there, learning how to understand what your business is about, understanding what the pain points are at, and then coming up with a solution, which is a combination of software and services that is going to get you to the next level. And so what now is going on is now I'm learning this other type of methodology. I had first learned Shakespearean methodology, which is when you learn how to scan a parcel of Shakespeare and understand exactly how the rhythm and all of the sounds work. And then you get into acting, and you break down the entire dramaturgy and character down to what these very simple essences, so that you can rebuild them on a systematized approach. And now I'm entering in this other phase where I'm breaking down communications, and you're communicating technology to executives, and that's the last thing they want to listen to. They don't want to sit there for some tech lecture, because they're turned off, and then they're going to downriver you to some guy in the IT department. So you have to find a way in order to make this real for them, to make it a little bit painful for them to understand and to empathize. Here's what you're dealing with. We've been now working with your company for, let's say, 3 or 4 weeks, and I've had my team in. We've done all these investigations and all these interviews, and here's what we've come up with. And do you agree with that? Is this what you're facing? I said, yeah, we are. Okay, well, this is essentially how we're going to approach it. So now I'm just reformulating all of this stuff in order to bring a business solution, a satisfying business solution. Because one of the things that when you're working for a software company during those days, and they were mostly NASDAQ listed, And everyone was flying high. It was during the big tech bubble. All the eyes are on every pipeline, and every Monday morning, I have a pipeline call with the rest of my team and my manager, where I am being taken through every deal in my pipeline, and I'm forced to justify why I'm in there, why I'm using the company's resources when he needs the same resources in order to pursue that deal. And when you learn that, you learn the essence of really what it is to use your time well, to understand, to empathize, and yet move towards a specific goal. And I became known as a pretty good qualifier, a pretty good qualifier, so that I'm not spending any time on the phone or in someone's office with someone who I have a very, very small chance of closing that deal with. So you learn how to actually ask all these questions and set things up, so have them qualify themselves out of the deal. So at the end of the conversation, they're going, you know what, maybe you're right, maybe we're not ready for this yet, and because this was going to be a big undertaking, and it's going to be painful. Because we're going to come in there and we're going to change your business around, and you have to be set for that. And part of my job was to kind of set the stage for that. And that becomes, now I'm taking all of these words and emotions and empathetic things, and I'm now codifying them into a sales methodology. And one of the things about the tech industry is that it's very process oriented. I mean, if you listen to any of these tech guys today, they talk in nothing but terms of process, on all of the vocabulary around that. And it's a very true thing. And then I get into the liquor industry, and these sons of bitches are living out in like 1935. Okay. I mean, there is some old school thinking here, some gangster stuff going on in the liquor industry. I came into the liquor industry, but like, I'm all processed and everything like this. And I'm going, dude, it's like the only reason you're here is because your relationship with this guy. Are you kidding me? That's going to fall apart in a minute. So it was, and so you have to readjust again. And we
just have about 10 minutes left. So, and I wanted to make sure. So one of the points that we, I'm losing my vocabulary, that we wrote back and forth about was this idea that everybody should learn to sell something.
Right.
So I sense that philosophy has come out of what we've been talking about, all along here. But if you would kind of flesh that out for us, what does that mean from your perspective? How do you see that benefiting us professionally?
Well, as you can see, I've been sort of like taking you down the path of that process, right? And at the very end of this, one of the things that I learned that, what I've been doing all through this was selling. And what I've been doing was actually living a purpose. And this gets back to our first question. I took a marketing workshop for actors when I was an actor. And one of the things that he taught us to do was find out, what is your purpose in life? And he gave us 4 signifiers. One was that it was made of simple words, so no overblown philosophy, very simple words that you can speak to anyone should you choose to share it. Number 2, it should be larger than your grasp. It should be one step past your grasp. Because when you think about it, if I've achieved my purpose, then what's after that, right? So it should be something that you're not really going to be able to accomplish in this lifetime. Number 3, you should be able to activate it with every decision that you make. And number 4, when you look back, you've been doing it since you were 6 years old. And my purpose in life is I bring change by getting the word out. It's that simple. And when I looked throughout my entire life, I make change by getting the word out. And that brings me to sales. It's invoking change in someone by getting whatever that word is, that story, that narrative, the back end processes, whatever that thing is. In the process of doing that, in the process of selling to somebody, there's no bullshit in selling. There is no bullshit. Just like there was no bullshit back in my Meisner class. You get to the heart of who you are. When you are forced to sell something for a living, you get to know who you are. You get to know who you are better than any other indicator, because it is going to tell you whether or not I'm the guy that can get up early in the morning and do this. I can actually kind of keep a focused concentration over time. I like working with people. I want to bring value to people. I'm happy when other people succeed. I'm motivated to be able to do this. All of these things that a good salesperson is. I've learned to be good with my time. I still struggle with it. All of these things. That is what sales is. That's what good sales is. Good sales is bringing value to someone else. So in my sales seminars that I do, I ask people, what is sales? And people talk about, well, it's convincing somebody or bringing the happiness. I said, no, sales is a set of methodologies and practices that ensures a predictable outcome in which there is an exchange of value between human beings. And therefore, it's the oldest profession in the world. And I'll make the argument that we develop language in order to sell to each other. And so that makes it the noblest profession in the world. And when you engage yourself at some time in your life in selling a product, now you got to get a product that you feel good about. You can't be selling crap out there, right? You got to have something that you can really emotionally get behind. And then your job is to get other people to adopt that. You learn about yourself, you learn about them, you learn about what no really means, learn about what yes really means. You get to understand your limits. Here's an example. I was selling software. I was actually doing pretty good at it. I went to the dentist. The dentist says, so you're not really interested in chewing your food when you're 70. I go, what are you talking about? He goes, you're grinding your teeth. I go, I am not. He goes, yeah, here are the x-rays. And he's showing me I'm grinding down my molars. So I was unable to shift that away from me. I couldn't get rid of it. And it was causing disruption in my personal life as well. I had come to understand the limit of what I can do. I get into the whiskey industry. I got rid of the mouth thing because now everybody wants to see the whiskey guy, so it's different. Right? But what I learned was I was not right. I was not set up to sell that really complex business transformational software that was causing too much stress on me. I learned something about myself, and I'll never make that mistake again. I'm selling a product that, I'm a whiskey salesman. I'm a merchant of happiness, so I'm bringing happiness in a completely different way. And I'm selling a tangible product now instead of a concept or an idea. But that whole idea brought me again closer to who I was and to what I am and where my edges are at. And what's soft inside of me and what's hard inside of me and what needs to change and sales focuses you. Sales focuses you like nothing else. And I'm a sales guy that wrote a whiskey book. That's all I am. I'm not a whiskey writer. I'm a guy who can put sentences together. I know how to tell a story, but essentially, I wrote that book from the perspective of a guy who has been on the street. I was on the street. I'm in the bars. I'm in the retail shops. I'm with the distributors and everything like that. I wrote it from that perspective. That was the perspective that I knew. And that's why people are engaging with the book so well, because it has that empathetic tone to it. But I'm selling the book. It's a book filled in a world of books just like it that no one needs. And so you have to find a way to bring value to people. No one cares. That's the number one thing I do in my seminars. Nobody cares about you. Nobody cares until you make them care. And that's the job of the salesman.
What do you say to someone who says, I can't sell, I don't like to sell, I'm not a salesman, all those things? Because I have those, I think we've had somewhat similar lives. I know when I started my first business, now it's, going back to the mid 80s, and I thought, hey, I got a college degree. I'm a smart guy, right? Start my business and I'll become successful. It's like, wow, I had no idea what I didn't know.
Right.
Right. And I really stumbled along until I learned how to do things like sell and
Yeah.
really be able to understand, you know, I look at sales as, how do I solve a problem that can I solve a problem that somebody else has?
Bingo.
Or if I can't, do I know someone who can?
And that's really what it is. And you nailed it right there. It's not me making sure that you get this in your hand and you give me some money for it. It has nothing to do with that. It's about me. Can I bring value to your life? Can what I have in my hand bring value to your life? Right. In the liquor industry, we're in the 3-tier system. So you can't sell directly to consumers. We have to sell through the tiers. And in every case, you have to help them understand that they're going to make money off of this. Mm-hmm. So everybody has to make money. So you're constantly selling value. And that's what I tell people. First of all, you've got the wrong idea. This is not always be closing. This is not Alec Baldwin in the first 30 minutes of Glengarry Glen Ross. Coffees for closers and third prize is you're fired. Right? It's not that. It's actually not. It's not ABC. It's ABV. Always bring value. Always bring value. And ABV actually works as a pun in the liquor industry because that's alcohol by volume.
I always tell people wealth comes from value delivered.
Yeah, right? There you go. That's exactly what it is. Wealth comes from value delivered. And I can tell you that my life, I don't make an enormous amount of money. I don't need to make an enormous amount of money. I never set out to make an enormous amount of money. What I found out that I was really good at was bringing value into the world in which I can immediately have some effect on, and then basking in the reflected glow of other people's value. Mm-hmm. If I can make people happy around me, I'm going to actually be able to bask in that glow. I'm going to get something back from that. You can talk about the universe giving things back to you and all that stuff, but that's really to me, that's sales. That's how you get to know who you are. That's how you get to know whether you're cut out for this or not. Not everyone's cut out for it. And a lot of people have, the wrong attitude going in, that I have to, pressure somebody and convince them it's everyone's Don Draper suddenly out of Mad Men, but it's not. It's really, let me listen to you. Let me hear you talk about the things where you want to go, and let me see if I can match up what I have in order to get you there. And if it works out, then we'll have an exchange of value that's right for you and it's right for me, and we're going to both walk out of here with something. Stephen Covey used to call it, the win-win-win. Right. So yeah, so that's kind of like where I think the philosophy is at. That's why everyone should learn how to sell one thing at some time in their life, because then you figure out who you are.
And I'm curious your response to this thought, and this we'll kind of have to wrap it up on this. Someone who tries, or someone who works on learning to sell and in the end just bombs out, is that still a worthwhile
100%? Oh my God, are you kidding me? We cannot get on the freeway unless we understand exactly where the cul-de-sacs are. We have to know what our limitations are at. I failed miserably. I've been fired from jobs. I've actually, some of the most best interactions I've had was when I got fired from a software job. It was like this guy did this so well. He's absolutely right. I don't belong here. He's sitting on my other shoulder, Right? But yeah, failing is part of it. I mean, that's exactly, you live to fail, right? I mean, no, you live to succeed and you accept the failures, right? And then that actually just brings you to the next chapter. It's, yeah.
We could talk for another, I think, 2 or 3 hours. There's so much that we didn't have a chance to unpack here. So I'll definitely have to have you back again.
And you and I are going to have to sit down and meet for a drink sometime.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I would love that. I just want to see if I can kind of recap some of the ideas that you brought up here, right here at the end. So one is to The incident with your foreman really brings to mind this idea that, we get advice, and sometimes we really have to listen to the advice and really take it in. Right now, I think you were fortunate that it was put in a way that you couldn't not listen to it, right? And frankly, people probably couldn't get away with that in the workplace these days.
Right.
But sometimes it's really worth listening to that advice, even if it goes against what we really think of ourselves. It's worth considering, and maybe we'll reject it, but maybe we should accept it. So I think that's one lesson that I would draw from your professional experience. Another is the importance of really understanding who we are.
Yeah.
Right? Because in the end, if we're going to have professional success, it's going to be an expression of really what is inside of us. A lot of people talk about, well, you got to do something you're passionate about. I'm not sure, and this is a question for the next time we meet, maybe. I'm not sure that you were necessarily passionate about everything that you did, but it was certainly an expression of who Robin Robinson is. And perhaps it's more important that we be authentic to what we do.
I think that's more of the word. I think that's more. I think it's the authenticity. Look, passion. I don't put a lot of stake in. And the great visual artist Chuck Close once said that inspiration is for amateurs. The rest of us just got up and went to work in the morning.
Right. I tell so many people, in many ways, life is an iterative process.
Yeah.
That's the thing, and I think too that's another that maybe that we'll make that the third lesson, because much of your life was trying these things, trying them until they work, figuring out what can I do, what's really not within my ken, and taking those next steps. A lot of the steps were really small steps along the way, but they took you very, very far, and that can sometimes be frustrating. We want that success right away. And yet, if it's going to be authentically ours, we're going to have to be patient with ourselves and our development. So
I don't believe that anymore that there's, and I've got this thing written on my wall here. I clipped this out of the newspaper back in the 1990s, written by Robert Reich, who was then Clinton's labor secretary. And he was giving a commencement address, and he talked about Reich's new rules of order. And one of the things that he talked about, this is the mid 90s now, he said, forget the ladder. The ladder is gone. We're talking about the succession ladder inside of any company, right? The ladder is gone. Think about the web. Think about 360-degree spider web like this, right? And what you're doing is you're picking up skills, and then you're taking them over here, and you're going to use them again, and you're going to develop them, and you're going to use them again. Your next job probably hasn't been created yet. And that when you can get your arms around that and bring that into you and get comfortable with the fact that there's no straight paths anymore, that I think is, that is, you get closer to a sense of personal fulfillment on that.
That's a great way to sort of wrap this episode up, because unfortunately we have to. Robin, thank you so much for, not just a wonderfully instructive story, but also just a lot of laughs. Maybe you're not doing stand-up anymore, but you certainly have not lost your gift to.
I'm doing sit down now. I'm getting older. I'm getting older, Kevin. I got to sit down now.
Don't talk about getting older, because I'm too close behind you. So thank you all very much for joining us. Thank you to my guest, Robin Robinson, and thank you all for coming and watching the Way to Wow show, People Making Money. We will be back again next Wednesday, 12:30 Pacific time, 3:30 p.m. Eastern time, and the other two time zones, 1 hour each way. And join us again. We'll have another great guest to talk with you. And I'm going to sign off the way I always do, which is to remind her, Marie, darling, you are still my belle. Thank you all so much.
That's great.